Gaming Bolt presents 15 greatest PlayStation 1 games of all time. The PlayStation 1 is considered one of the best video game consoles of all time. It sold over 102 million units and served as the base for dozens, if not hundreds, of classic franchises. To that effect, compiling the 15 greatest PS1 games of all time can be difficult. Regardless, you can rest assured that every title here is worth playing, even if there's something that we've missed. So without further ado, let's get into it. Final Fantasy VII. For many people, this was the reason they bought a PlayStation 1. Sure, the CG cutscenes didn't indicate the amount of turn-based combat that it had, but Final Fantasy VII was still a trailblazer for its time. It took Japan-developed RPGs into the mainstream, catering to more mature audiences. The graphics were leaps and bounds above any of the SNES Final Fantasy games, and the story of Cloud and Sephiroth remains etched in gaming history. Oh, and Final Fantasy VII is also a pretty robust, insanely involving, highly entertaining RPG in its own right as well. Resident Evil 2. When Capcom first released Resident Evil in 1996, it garnered acclaim for its innovative structure and horror. However, it was still a zombie outbreak in a lone mansion, so Capcom amplified the horror even more, heading to the zombie-infested Raccoon City, sticking harder to the survival horror element of running and conserving ammo, and bringing greater monstrosities than ever before. The result remains a hallmark of survival horror to this day. Metal Gear Solid. Have you heard the tragedy of Hideo Kojima the Wise? We thought not. It's not a story that Konami would tell you. In 1998, Konami Computer Entertainment Japan would release Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1. This was a stealth espionage title that took an overhead view with the actual sneaking. It was actually in the vein of Metal Gear 1987 for the NES. However, with its cinematic presentation, extensive cutscenes, and memorable story, it would be many players' first brush with the world of Metal Gear. Suffice to say, things only got crazier from there. Tekken 3. Touted as one of the greatest fighting games ever made for years and years, Namco's Tekken 3 launched in 1998 for the PS1. It wasn't just the graphics optimized for the Namco System 12 which brought us characters that were sharper than ever, nor was it the introduction of 15 new characters, each with their own stories. Rather, it was the beautiful fighting game mechanics, combined with a greater degree of depth thanks to the ability to sidestep. Plus, it had Gon. Every game is better with Gon. Final Fantasy IX. We know. 2 Final Fantasy games on the same list? Don't let that distract you from the brilliance that is Final Fantasy IX. Following the story of Zidane and Garnet, Final Fantasy IX had a revamped job system that was easy to pick up while providing lots of customization. A wonderful sense of humor and the active time event for seeing events at different locations were also nice little changes to the standard formula. As a throwback to a simpler Final Fantasy in an era of increasingly complex mechanics, Final Fantasy IX is an instant classic. Street Fighter Alpha 3. It seemed like Capcom would do nothing but continuously milk Street Fighter II through its fighting game years. While that still held true, it eventually succeeded it with the Street Fighter Alpha series, and Street Fighter Alpha 3 was its pinnacle. The astonishing 2D sprites looked great on the PS1, and Street Fighter Alpha 3 let players choose from 3 different fighting styles for each character. Its sizable roster was a pinnacle of balance and fun that remains endearing to this day. Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor had Steven Spielberg himself as a designer and was developed by DreamWorks Interactive. While many first-person shooters were still trying to reconcile with Half-Life's brilliance, Medal of Honor was a brilliant depiction of World War II, from its soundtrack to its visual style. Chrono Cross. At the time of its release, Chrono Cross was a controversial game, following up the brilliance of the SNES classic while taking many themes and characters from Radical Dreamers. Chrono Cross told a brand new story with a complicated combat system. However, all the nostalgia in the world couldn't make us ignore the brilliance of Chrono Cross's environments, its joyous compositions, or the sheer depth to its story and characters. Gran Turismo 2. Polyphony Digital owes a lot to the PlayStation 1 era. It's essentially when its revered racing simulator Gran Turismo first started. Gran Turismo 2 was a refinement on that formula, however. It added more of everything, with the simulation mode pushing players to earn licenses and trophies, pay for its 650 cars, and master its dynamics. With a rally mode, high number of tracks, and events separated from tournaments, Gran Turismo 2 proved an exceptional successor for the series. Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver. Directed by Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame, Legacy of Kain: Soul Reaver was a darkly compelling action-adventure. The combat may not have been complex and the ending was kind of However, on the whole, this was a game that melded cinematic atmosphere with compelling gameplay in such an expert fashion. Seeing this achieved in the PS1 era, that too with such great graphics and sound design, was nothing short of a triumph. Vagrant Story. It may have had to fight for the spotlight against other Squaresoft properties like Final Fantasy IX, however, Vagrant Story showcases the kind of craftsmanship and raw brilliance that can occur when breaking from the norm. Featuring a complex combat system and utterly compelling story that blurs the lines between good and evil, Vagrant Story was proof that Squaresoft could still take risks and have them pay off. Well, for the time, that is. Castlevania: Symphony of the Night. Castlevania has always been a hallmark franchise, but Castlevania: Symphony of the Night changed things forever. Not only did it feature someone who wasn't a Belmont as the protagonist with Alucard, but it brought several role-playing elements like stats and leveling up. Dracula's castle became a non-linear playground of Metroid-like exploration with secrets and powers that unlocked new sections. There's a reason the genre is now called Metroidvania. Such was the influence of Castlevania. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. The criticism that sequels couldn't utterly outclass their predecessors in the PS1 era was demolished by a number of games on this list, but none more so than Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Along with adding the manual for extending one's combos, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 had perhaps the series' peak of well-designed stages, awesome gameplay, amazing soundtrack, and polish. It does make the downfall of the series in recent times all the more painful. Wipeout XL. Futuristic racers weren't very easy to develop in the mid to late 90s, mostly due to the hardware limitations involved. Wipeout XL, also known as Wipeout 2097, didn't show it though, delivering fast gameplay with controls that were easier and more refined than its predecessor. Wipeout XL didn't stop there, as it added new weapons and the ability to outright destroy opponents. With music by The Prodigy, The Chemical Brothers, and Fluke, along with a better frame rate and background effects, Wipeout XL was a successor that far surpassed the original. Crash Bandicoot Warped. Naughty Dog's Crash Bandicoot series has always been hailed as incredibly solid, but Crash Bandicoot Warped is definitely its peak. Right away, things changed with the ability to play as Coco, Crash's sister, and embarking on new vehicle sections. In terms of graphics, Warped looks great and performs great, offering a consistently entertaining experience. It may seem straightforward to say that the game is just great all around, but that's exactly the case with Crash Bandicoot Warped. It felt like Naughty Dog's hard work over the years finally came to fruition, coalescing in this pinnacle of action platforming. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.